Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special Monday webinar. I am Liz Downing, e-commerce marketing manager at Takeometrics. I've got John Hefter here with me. He's an SVP and co-founder of Thrasio. Say hi, John.
Hey, everyone. What's up?
So this is pretty exciting. We are neighbors with Thrasio, technically, both based in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the US. John travels everywhere, all over so it was so special for me to be able to get him today because I caught him in between trips, I think. But a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. One, this is being recorded. So if you registered for this webinar, you will receive a recording in your email. Two, we do encourage questions. We don't want this just to be talking at you. So if you put your questions into the question section of GoToWebinar, I'll do my best to kind of weave them into the conversation with John, but if not, we'll save some time at the end for a Q&A. We're shooting for about 45 minutes of content, 5 minutes to 10 minutes of Q&A. Depends on you guys, depends on how many questions you have. So without further ado, I think we can get started. I'll first tell you a little bit about Takeometrics. Takeometrics helps you optimize your advertising on different e-commerce platforms, Amazon, Walmart, eBay now. We also have an awesome managed services team that can help you optimize your advertising and figure out how to best run your business and succeed on these different e-commerce marketplaces. John, I don't think that anybody doesn't know what Thrasio is and what it does, but why don't you tell us anyway?
Sure. Yeah. Thrasio, we are the market leader and largest acquirer of Amazon businesses. Now we have about 150 brands in our purview currently, and are on pace at adding brands weekly. So if anyone's interested in learning about the M&A market or exploring the possibility of selling their brand, they can hit us up on our website or reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever, and I'll point you in the right direction. More importantly, I think whenever we do public speaking, which I'll count this as an event like that, we try to be as open with any information that we have and don't have. We really believe that this isn't a mercantile pie that we're trying to get a finite piece of. We want to help sellers grow, whether they sell to us or not, and we want to help people succeed in this space. It's an immensely exciting time right now, and the more happy sellers that are out there in the world, the better it is for everybody.
I absolutely love that attitude because that is really what it's all about. The spirit of this industry is entrepreneurship and growth, excitement. It's all about the uncertainty that exists on Amazon and now so many other marketplaces, but mainly there's still so much mystery around Amazon. But
I think so too. I mean, like when I first started too, we'd go to events and a lot of sellers they'd flip their badge over, and no one really wanted to reveal sort of what they do or what category they're in or anything like that. The reality is, though, is the most successful people I've met in this space openly share information with each other. They're givers, right? They're like even with their competitors in some degree. So to me, taking on that sort of giving mindset is really is very important no matter what level you're at, because at the end of the day, you need help from other people in order to get all the information you need in this space. You can't be isolated on an island.
That's absolutely true. And that's why we do these webinars too, is to kind of get the information out there. That's why they're always free, is because we hear questions. We've got our ear to the ground in the industry and we know what questions you have. So I've gotten a lot of questions lately about what it takes to get your brand ready or get your e-commerce business ready for an exit. And I know that there are players in this space, but I think that probably Thrasio has, you have your own criteria when you're looking at an e-commerce business for
Sure.
For purchase. So maybe we could start with, so you're looking at a brand, right? What makes them absolutely like you jump right on it? Yes, let's go. Here's the money. Take my money.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question and a simple one to ask in some ways, because it's always a top of mind, maybe a harder one to answer. But I'd like to take it back. When you're an Amazon seller, you should always be thinking about, what does the customer want, right? So if you're building new creative, if you're making improvements to your product, whatever you're packaging, you should be obsessed with the idea of like, what does my customer want to see? And if you're thinking about selling your Amazon business to someone like a Thrasio or whoever else, you want to kind of be asking yourself that same question. Put yourself in the mind of the customer, which would in some case might be us. So what would Thrasio want to see? What would anyone want to see? Um, for me, I think what's really hot in the market and something that's always been intriguing to us is a sense of operational simplicity. And what I mean by that is like, uh, if you had a business that had, I'm making this up, 3 SKUs, all of them had 100,000 reviews, a 4.8 score, and you were doing 20 million a year on those ASINs, that might seem like you don't have risk diversification, but for someone like a Thrasio, it's exactly what we want. Because we're building a portfolio of things, and the more simplicity we have, the better. So in some ways, ourselves and other aggregators might be looking towards simplicity as being the paramount of what you could present to us. The other thing I would say is, as just an open recommendation, is spend some, yes, of course, EBITDA is king, right? When you go to exit, but don't do what I call like jumping over a 20 to get to a 5, thinking that you're going to maximize EBITDA by not doing the things that you should be doing. So maybe it's making a product improvement or launching a new product that helps diversify your portfolio in the sense of protecting the original asset that you have, or doing really great creative that you know costs 10 grand, but you decided just not to do it and you're kind of using an old render and something that works just fine. Building something that looks like an attractive brand that people would want to engage with and be interested in. Having a clear differentiation story as to why your product is a winner and is going to continue to win. Having a roadmap of activities that you could do, even if you're not actively doing them yourselves, that you can use to tease the buying entity to say like, hey, this is the next move you can make. For me, that's really it. If you take a hard look at your business, there's always things that maybe you're not great at, right? That's the way it is in life, like or things you're not interested in. Get those things looked at, fixed, rendered, and deliver a very neat and clean package. So that's what I'd say. And then now that being said, look, consistent, repeatable EBITDA is always king. So you're going to have to look at a few things. If you're in, say, like an obsolescence space, like the toy space or something like that, or you're in phone cases or something along those lines, your business might be a little less attractive to most aggregators than others. Why? Because there's this complexity of like, if you buy this business, you will have to continually launching new stuff to maintain its momentum. So that will be, in general, less attractive to an aggregator or anyone who's sort of in the operating space.
That's interesting. So that's a lot to take in. So we
Sure.
want simplicity, we want a good, clear roadmap, and we want something that makes the brand special, or
Sure.
all of the things about the brand to be special. So if someone isn't quite there yet, there are inconsistencies or there are inefficiencies in their business, for instance, or they haven't quite gotten down their brand, their key different, let's just trip over all the words today.
Differentiators, yeah.
Yeah. What are some things that, because obviously you did say you like to see brands grow, whether you're going to purchase them or not. When you see somebody who's about a year away, there's enough for them to do that there's still things that they need to do, but it would only take about a year of doing these particular things in order for them to be ready for an exit. What does that brand look like? What key things do they need to do? Obviously they need to they need to simplify and all that kind of stuff, but like when you see a brand that's just not quite there yet, what are the things that they're not quite focusing on well enough?
I mean, every operator, every business is different to some degree, so there's no universal formula of like being a year away. I think it's understanding an internal actuary table in your own head that says like, what are the risks and benefits of me operating this brand for another year? And we've coming out a very complicated time right now of like what sort of, if you've been operating for a couple of years, what was that COVID bump like for you? Is it expiring? Could you leverage that and an exit now? Some degree. Like what's your market doing? Are there people entering your space who are doing a better job? And can you be humble enough to admit that like maybe in a year this thing that you have is not as good as you could have? Are you really good at launching stuff and you have a hit rate that's super high? Then maybe you want to dive into that and set yourself up for a deal that allows you to have like an earn out in the back end. So even if your EBITDA shrinks a little bit because you've built these other new assets, and that obviously takes money to do that, right? You're setting yourself up position to have the best exit long term. So really, you have to make an honest assessment of your business. You have to say, like, from a risk perspective, what is next year likely going to look at? Is my category growing? Is organic search in this category growing? Or Google search is growing? Is this a fad thing? Is this a steady asset? What else can I launch? Are there easy things that I could leverage my halo? Is what we kind of call it at Thrasio, which is like, all right, I'll give you an example we have in house, right? We have the number 1 and number like 3 salt and pepper grinders in the space, right? So there's two schools of thought. So one is like, all right, well, we're a kitchen brand, let's say for this one, right? So we can go and we can find a whatever, I don't know, pot and pan set, coffee maker, and we can continue our kitchen brand. But really at that point, you're sort of starting from zero in a way, besides your past experience. And you're hoping upon hope that your offering will be good enough and you'll get it, 6 times out of 10, you'll get a positive result when you launch the thing. But you have this salt and pepper grinder, right? There's a good chance that people really need salt. So, and then if you have that, you can just leverage, right, your best seller that's getting all of these sessions, and you can sell the salt with the salt and pepper grinder, right, as a way to leverage that asset to likely guarantee the chances that you will be successful. And then maybe it's something as look as like, all right, well, is there a size offering? Is there a variation or something that I could do that a color that's the second most popular in the space and you only sell the top one, where you can get like an easy win to optimize the thing that you've already built, and thus increase the proportionality of success rate on the back end.
That's great. We do have a question. Are you mostly interested in FBA businesses, or how does seller's merchant mix apply, especially given the cost of import shipping now?
Yeah, I mean, look, for us, FBA is still king, right? We have capacity to deal with wholesale relationships, to have a Shopify component. Some other people might be really interested in your wholesale presence or your Shopify presence, but the reality is what we're seeing is the most interest seems to be lining around this idea of simplicity, which is maybe counterintuitive to how people see at building their businesses. And I will say this: never build your business to sell, build your business to be successful first, right? So if you think it really needs a Shopify store to support your, the asset that you built, then do it. Like don't stop the idea of not doing it, but understand that the balance of the two things, right? And then also understand like what type of brand you have. We've seen a lot of people have a nice asset on Amazon that's sort of like how do I say this, like a ubiquitous staple item. Let's say like a spatula, for instance. We always use that as an example. And then they'll build a D2C site, but it's like, why? You think someone's going to be scrolling Instagram and then see a spatula ad and then click on it? It's
Ooh,
not going to
spatula.
happen. You know what I mean? Like but some people don't use that sort of common sense approach of like, should I be engaging in this activity? Is this actually worth me doing? Or am I doing this to follow some sort of like playbook written by someone else that's not for your particular business? So you tell yourself, I need to be in wholesale, which is great. It's a real pain in the butt though. It's a ton of work. And is that the best use of your time to do all of those things? Or should you do a few things right and then tease whoever's buying your business to say like, hey, you could take this thing into wholesale if you wanted to, and you probably like make a ton of money. or I open the door, I'm in like 10 stores, but you guys could grow this to 1,000. It's that idea of like when anyone buys an asset, they want to look at it as something they could possibly make better or grow. Again, all we're doing is assessing risk on the M&A side. Whoever's buying your business, they're looking at it as like, is this a steady thing? So if you came to me and said like, I have a slime kit company and I did 20 million in sales last year, and then I look at like slime kit searches on Google and they went like this and now they're plummeting to the earth.
As people's furniture continued to get ruined, right?
It's whatever. Yeah, like, or whatever the next thing is, right? Like you just have to know that people are likely going to understand that, and they're going to place a value on like what they see the risk vector being in the future. So if I saw like a slime kit thing or anything that has obsolescence, right? Uh, or I'm selling drones, I don't know, and then I see you're $99, and I see the same product coming in from direct from factory at $39.99, and it's slowly gaining rank. Any person with any M&A sense is going to be like, dude, this thing's on the way out. There's a price I'll probably pay you for it, but it's not what you think it is. So it's
Right.
just like understanding that you're not going to likely, and I'm not saying this, there's always a chance to put someone over on someone. I don't think you should do business that way, but people do. But you're likely not going to, right? Like anyone with a sophisticated diligence team is going to look at the space and be like, this is really what you got. So just be aware, and it's okay to get in those cyclical businesses. And some people have built massive portfolios and made a bunch of money doing that. But if you're looking to exit, you just have to understand the different value placed on something like that.
I like what you said about don't build a business with the intent of exiting. I've seen a lot of like podcasts and I've seen a lot of content out there about how to build a business to sell.
Yeah.
And that sort of flies in the face of the spirit that of this industry that I fell so in love with, which is like that spirit of entrepreneurship. And you've got something that you really want to put out there. You've got the drive to work for yourself and be your own boss and all that kind of stuff. And um, so I was going to ask you what kind of businesses are like 5 years out, but that would really be kind of like a launching business, and you're not supposed to launch a business in order to sell it. So
I mean, look, I think that's up to you. It's up to your own vision as a seller. You might be super aspirational. You might say that I have a product that if I play my cards right, I can start an Amazon, I can get some e-commerce leverage, then I can go to a wholesale company and I'll negotiate with Target for 2 years, and I'll get in, all of a sudden I'll be in 10,000 stores and I'll be 20 million in revenue or 80 million in revenue, and then my exit will be huge. And if that's your goal, then that's a 4 to 5 year goal, right? If your goal is like, I want to build something for 2 years, drive earnings as much as I can, get an exit so I have some comfort in my life to not have all my eggs in one basket. And I have to say, from a mindset perspective, it's such a relief when you step out of that. I can't tell you enough, like that when you're ramping an Amazon business and it's going well, well, you run into this cash problem, right? Because your business is scaling like this and you think it's going to continue this way, but that means you have to order inventory for that scale, which means all the cash that you've earned here is going back into the business. And you create this cycle. And then you're always like, well, what if my market declines? What if a competitor comes in? What if I get a crazy attack? And then you're doing 4 million a year, but you're close to upside down. So for me, there's something about building something to eventually sell while not worrying about the selling piece that then gives you some level of assurance, so you never have to be in a position where you wake up with the uncomfortable feeling of everything's at risk. Yeah, I've definitely seen that unfortunately I've seen that in the past where businesses have declined way faster than they thought they would, and the guys hadn't taken anything off the table and they're sort of flying high, and then reality comes and kind of bites them in the butt.
well, and when you have all your eggs in that basket, that's why, throughout the years, a suspension an attack, like you said, from a competitor or from just a black hat altogether, when you have everything tied up in that one place, it's absolutely devastating.
For sure. So it's just, and then you talk to people after they've had that sort of that movement towards security in some sense and a little bit of diversification. It's a different mindset. And the way I look at it is like you start playing poker in the way that good poker players play, where the chips are just pieces of the game. When you're playing poker and you're looking at the chips as money in your bank account, it's not the right way to play the game, right? You're
Right.
going to be more risk averse, and you're not going to make the tactical moves that you should be making. So I might have an idea for one. Actually, I was at lunch on Friday. I came up with an idea for one of our brands. I think it's just like it's nuts, but I think it's just might work on like social media to get like a whole little zeitgeist behind the thing, and it's probably going to cost like 15 grand to get it done, right? But like we can do that. We're at a stage where like we can take that shot, and this one might not work. It might be a total disaster, but you know what? One of the next 5 ones will, and it really will. And if you don't have the flexibility to sort of make those choices, and you're always focused on tomorrow's lunch as opposed to like the long-term play, then you're putting yourself at a tactical disadvantage.
That's
Another
great.
thing that I want to dive into, which is like, where's this crazy market going? I mean, they they call them gold rushes. They don't call them like gold stabilities, right? I mean, we're in a pop phase right
We
now where
actually have
there's
a question about that. That's
okay,
valuations these days are pretty amazing. How long do you see the trend of high valuations continuing? So that coupled with like the way the industry's going. So I guess just continue with what you were saying, but
sure,
obviously there are people that are watching that are interested in your answer to this.
totally, yeah. I mean, I see like this is the reality that I see is that there was a lot of fast money going into this market. And the majority of the fast money entering the market, by the way, all these people talk to each other. The people who gave us money know the people who gave whoever else money, and so on and so forth and down the line, right? And they're all looking at it as like, wow, this is a massive opportunity. We want to get in, and please take our money to go do this thing, right? That stops the minute someone really screws up. In fact, all of our competitors should be praying that Thrasio does an amazing job the next 2 years. Otherwise, the cash was just going to dry up. And that's the reality is there's people who are in this space who don't know how to operate these brands, who don't know how to deal with suspensions, who don't know how to tie the supply chain together, who don't know a heck of a lot of things. And eventually, someone's really going to get burnt, or a few people will. And that is going to send a shockwave through the market. I don't know if it's in 3 months, 9 months, a year. And this sort of gold rush will sort of come to an end. Now, do I think we'll go back to 2018 when multiples were relatively low and there was no one in the space to sort of like be competitive with us? Of course not. No. I just think we're going to, like anything naturally, we're sort of like hitting this peak right now. Someone's going to screw up something. The money's going to dry up a bit, and then things will level down. They'll never go back to where they were, and then they'll slowly start building up again. But you have to look at it, if you're a seller, like know what you're looking at. Multiples are hotter than they've ever been, right? We're coming off the COVID bump. You still have leverage there. We don't know how Amazon's going to reconcile their supply chain or how their performance numbers will be or whatever else it is. Like now is a good time. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. I mean that, right? I'm just looking. This is just my personal opinion. It's whatever I say here is not going to affect Thrasio's business or the market. I'm really trying to say, like, if I was sitting there and I'm a seller, like, what would I be looking at? I'd be looking at like we had one of the most crazy historical economic events in history, period, with COVID, a completely shift in the consumer's mindset, where we basically saw 10 years of e-commerce growth in like 4 months from a percentage wise against retail. We saw an entirely new market be built, this M&A market that we weren't the first, but we were the first to be successful at it. And so we created this market. Tons of money is coming into it. the dust hasn't settled on who actually knows how's operating these things yet. Like, you know, it's hot right now. It's really hot. And I don't think that will last in perpetuity. Anyone who just uses common sense will know that like some sort of reckoning will come down the road eventually. And some of these aggregators will fail, and then they'll go up for sale, and then, or the multiples will be up so high that and the cost of capital is so high, especially for the people who are just starting out who haven't proved anything, that they'll be upside down. They just can't, they'll get in the gold rush themselves. They'll see the competitive market. They'll overpay for something with a crazy deadline, and then they won't know how to do it, or they'll get suspended for 46 days in their first big acquisition, something crazy like that, right? So again, I don't know when that's going to happen. And of course, I could be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball to see where this is going. But it's something I would be cognizant of and trying to think of like when to hit it. And everyone as an investor falls into this like, oh, I'm not going to, I want to buy at the bottom or I want to sell at the very top. It never works that way. Like you're never going to make the perfect tactical decision, period. Right. So for me, it's like, all right, do I have a proxy for like what seems like a wise decision at the time? So no matter what happens, I can look back and be like, all things considered, I think it was the right choice relative to the time. Because you might wait for top market and then see the calls literally dry up, right? All the emails you're getting say like, hey, you want to sell your business might one day just be poof, right? Or people will gobble up businesses and they'll run out of capital to gobble up more. They'll need time to settle in and the market will cool. So it's a fascinating time. I think it's a super exciting time to consider selling right now. Look, I hope it stays hot forever. The hotter it stays, the better it is for us in
Sure.
some ways, right? But I also like to be a realist about where we might be going to.
I have a question about that, but I'm going to save it for
Okay.
later. Because we have a couple of questions from the audience that I think are really, really good. Um, and one of them is from my friend Jason. And this is, so the question is, how do you make sure that the reviews you're buying in a product or listing are legitimate and not purchased, like the thousands of China sellers that were recently banned from Amazon? In other words, how important are reviews to your valuation process?
Oh, of course, like it's important. Honestly, it's not rocket scientist. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out kind of what's fluff and what's not. There's so many factors that go into looking at reviews and knowing they're real. The first one that anyone can do is just read them, right?
Yeah, if
And
they
and then
all came in the same day and they're all worded the same way, you can be pretty sure that they're fake.
yeah, right. Or they're all like 3 words, and they're just you know what I mean. It's just like you're going to see that. There's other ways of doing it. I don't want to say they're proprietary for us, but they're systematic that we've built that basically can identify a lot. And we've seen a lot. And then we've also seen a lot of those businesses get sold to other, I'm not going to mention anybody, other people for very high multiples. Right. And
So you,
you don't
so
know
you,
when we knew it was garbage is what I'm saying from a review
right.
standpoint. Not
So
saying the
you knew,
products. Yes.
and then you watched that brand get purchased by somebody else, and you were like,
Sure.
haha, the
Yep.
little Nelson from The Simpsons noise.
Yeah. And there's also
So
just categories, that like funny business is likely going to be like, and it's if you have, there's other things too that are just profiling the sellers in the sense of like, uh, where do they come from, who's in their circle, like what are the tactics that like if they were from an original mastermind group, like it's not that hard if you're just wise about it, right? And you can be patient and you can sort of like look at data and look at things like that. But it's something that's important. And that goes back to another issue though. Focus on, I should have said this for at the top. I'm sorry, I messed this up. Focus on having a really good product. Like you can, there's still stuff out there in the ecosystem that you can, I'm sure, buy a bunch of fake reviews and they'll work out and people can do all kinds of shady stuff. And I know it still happens. I don't know what degree, right? But like why not just take all that energy and money in making sure that your offering is actually better than your competition's? Because then you don't need to do all that stuff. Like, why not just make your whatever better? I don't know, your scissors better.
In fairness, though, there are plenty of really awesome products out there that have a really hard time competing on Amazon because there are people with all the fake reviews,
Sure.
because they get
Well, that's
attacked, because advertising's so expensive in their particular category, for instance. I mean, it's hard to, even if you've made a really great product, it's hard to make a splash with it without a considerable amount of capital and a considerable amount of
what
effort.
I would counter that. Then you made a poor assessment of the market you're trying to enter, is what I would say. Like, measure twice, cut once. But one of the things, if I was going to enter a market, first thing is I would have to create a sales pitch for myself or my partners or whatever, and be like, why is this thing going to win? What are the advantages? Where's the protective moat? Like, if I had something that, like, we saw this one product that was like, it required certification in 50 states in order to sell it. You're on state, and for me, I was like, well, that's a place I want to be, because no one's going to go through the pain in the butt of doing that. So it's like sort of gated, right? Or it's really easy to copy a spatula and produce one cheaper. Do you have some IP or formulation or something that's much harder? And then if you have that, then likely you'll have more of a stable asset. If you're in a space that is ubiquitous, can you make it special to at least give yourself like a 6 months head start? I gave this example all the time. I just think of like a very simple product that I remember like 3 or 4 years ago. All these, like, you get these newsletters and things are like, launch a lemon squeezer. By the way, if you ever read into those things, it's too late. It's over by the time you get advice from like any sort of piece of software or like newsletter. But then I think to myself, it's like, all right, well, how am I going to win the lemon squeezer space when they're all kind of the same? Some are ceramic coated, some are stainless steel, whatever. Well, in my head, I'm going to come up with like a branding play. I'm going to work with the factory to make me like crazy strong hinges. And then I'm going to show my lemon squeezer like breaking apart a baseball or like a watermelon or something. And I'll give it a cool brand name, and I'll give it like rubber grips that I'll maybe patent it or whatever. And then I might enter the lemon space and have a shot no matter what the reviews are, because it's such a compelling offering. But if
Because
I'm
you've
just
made
going to
the Jinsu of lemon squeezers, basically.
Exactly. Right. But if I'm just going to like launch a box of 1,000 chopsticks, and they're the same chopsticks you get everywhere else, and it's just a price play or something like that, then, and there's no differentiation between their quality or between what they are or their price, it's like that's that's a game where you get very susceptible to attacks. And the other thing is just realize like what types of products are more prone to having those sort of events happening. And there's something that's like really easy rule to use in your head. Um, if it's a really cheap item with high margins, then the risk reward is just too tempting for people who don't play fair.
So, say you've got that great product that it's got patented grips and it can crush a baseball. So this is two questions rolled into one to our audience members that are asking questions. How important is the actual on Amazon branding to a company like Thrasio? We had someone ask, is a branded storefront necessary, or do you purchase businesses with strong ASINs that are not yet to be brand registered? So brand registry and then additional branding, like on
We can,
point, A plus, all that stuff. Like, how does all that factor in for you?
I mean, brand registry we can get around and work with. It's not a big deal. We buy products all the time that are not completed brands yet. And it's total for us. It's like not bothersome. However, I would say if you think that creating a brand for this thing will get you meaningful differentiation that will lead to better unit session rates or conversion rates, whatever you're going to call them, you should do it. If you think you know what you're doing, it's something you want to do, and you think you can actually make marked improvements, because that starts a lot of things start that positive feedback loop or whatever, the flywheel, right? But one is definitely conversion rate. And people, like, people would say like brand doesn't matter on Amazon, but brand always kind of matters, right? It like, do you want to, I want to present something to the public in a way that it looks like it's been in a retail store for a long time. I just, for some reason, didn't see it. Just having that level of trust to me is a couple points on your conversion rate. But if it's like literally XYZ 123 brand and it's a random product and they don't quite match up and there's nothing special about it, likely, unless your price offering is the play, you're sacrificing long-term health.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions about that. I think a lot of people, I, I I know for a fact that a lot of people have like bumped into trouble with brand registry, and there are some roadblocks that didn't used to be there or weren't as hard to overcome. Um, so I think that's probably a concern out there for, especially like this person, Christopher, asked, what is the minimum size company MA looks for, and would you pay more for a real brand? So while you don't have to have brand registry and while you don't have to have the branding in place,
Sure,
are you
like
going to pay more?
some will and some won't, right? And it really depends on what that brand means to us, in the sense of like, can we take this thing and really make it a special thing, right? Or is it on its way to being special and we're just going to take it and do the finishing touches because the person scale their business as much as they can. So for me, it's not always, but often a good use of time to figure out what that is. But at the same time, it has to be really meaningful. You can't just say make a brand, right? And I've had, by the way, sellers too who have this there's something, I forget the exact psychological term. It's basically like a participation bias. So if you take any subset of couples in the world, and you ask them like who participates most in the relationship when it comes to like duties or work or everything like that, everyone will say 60% for themselves, right? It's like there's a miscalculation. We have trouble seeing the work that we do against the work that someone else does, and it's a natural phenomena. I think what sellers often do is overvalue what they think they've built in their brand. So like I've like had people literally tell us like, we built a community around umbrellas. Really? Have you?
Maybe.
Maybe, probably not, right? People love our stupid ubiquitous product that everyone else has. And they like, but in their heads, they've sort of like, this is their baby, I get it. Right. But they don't, like, again, they're not putting their mindset in the mindset of someone who might be buying the thing, who just sees an asset and like a likely path for its future and the growth in the future. So I'm saying it's like, be careful, consider buying brands if you think it will add value for your company, but only do it in that case. And then be careful of overvaluing it, because you'll put yourself in a position where it's just like, like there's a guy down the street for me. He's had his house on and off the market for literally as long as I've lived here. That's 11 years. He says his house is waterfront. Technically it is, but it's in front of a swamp. But he's charging a waterfront price for the house and no one buys it. So he runs through 12 real estate agents or whatever he's done. He has to, clean his house up 74,000 times for open houses that no one ever ends up buying it. He has a belief in this thing that isn't a reality. And
In his swamp
sometimes
house.
sellers will, yeah. So sometimes sellers will like overvalue the thing they have, and they'll go through the process of like, I want to sell. And they'll talk to 37 different people and they'll get the same answer, which is like, it's this thing, not what you think it is. And they'll waste all of this time and energy not getting to the outcome which they desired. Or they will, another mistake they'll often make is like, look, when people tell stories or they talk about business events they've had, no one likes to undersell. Have you ever heard a seller say like, oh man, I did a bad job negotiating? Should have gotten way more for what I sold. That almost never happens. I'm sure it's happened. It's always like, dude, I got 19x for my thing. I'm the smartest guy around. And so then a seller will anchor and think that that outlier story, even if that one happens to be true for some extreme circumstance, they'll then anchor their mind and say, like, this is what I should get for my business. The guy who sold whatever, Harry's or something like that. Like, I should get that price because that's what it is. And they'll anchor themselves to it, but it's not a reality. So what I'm saying is of course, try to maximize the value you can get for your business. That's your job when you're going to sell it. But also just take a reality pill and try to put yourself in the mind of someone who might want to buy your business.
So kill your darling, pretty much.
Or just, yeah, look at it as it's just it's you're looking at it as your baby, they're looking at it as a thing. And you have to like find the happy middle ground between the two.
So we have so many questions. I think that we're going to have to dig into some of these. So let's go from small business to big business. That's how I'm going to organize them in my head. So Kathy asks, you talk about high sales dollar companies selling, but what about tiny businesses that have great product but need to be in the hands of more savvy sellers? So basically, the product is there, but the person who owns the product and is selling the product isn't savvy enough to get it where it needs to go. Are you interested in, or is anybody interested in purchasing a situation like that? Or is that a situation where somebody needs to invest in the resources to get, if they're not savvy, then they need to get an agency, like for instance, to manage the account, to bring it
Sure.
to a more successful level.
I mean, for us, you have to understand that whether you're buying a business that does 500,000 a year or 500 million, the amount of work you do in diligence is very similar. If it's a pure Amazon business, right? So you have to look at the value time of taking over a small business when someone's in the M&A space, like we are. It's a real weight to take. So having a business that's really small, I'm sure there's people out there in the world who will put an offer for it. But the question is like, is your time better spent saying if you really have a great product, right? Then getting some help to grow to be what it can be is probably good use of your 6 months or a year of your life. So it's not that you won't get offers from people, you will, but they certainly won't be good as a proven thing. Everyone has the silver ball, like my next thing's the best thing. My next launch is going to be I've got the greatest idea. I'm guilty of this, by the way, just so you know.
Me too.
Like, but in the M&A world, when you get the guys in the suits and they're looking at spreadsheets, that's not what they care about. It's like they care about reliable performance.
So there isn't that diamond in the rough aha moment that you have, or one of the other people at Thrasio, where you're like, this product, I don't care that the sales are really, really low because the opportunity here is apparent.
No, of course there are, but they're more rare in reality and common in sellers' minds, is what I would say. Again, it goes back to that belief in my, like, this is the greatest thing ever that I've sort of come up with. And sometimes it is, but even then, it's like, all right, if it really is the greatest thing ever, then find a way to maximize the growth within your ability or within the resources that you have around you, and then show, like, if you had whatever the most first electric car or whatever, selling the idea of it is hard, or like, hey, we sold 12 electric cars. Having 2 years of steady growth in electric car sales makes that thing way more valuable. And that's the reality. It's always going to be that way.
So in other words, it's not like a great product is going to get discovered. Like, when my brain goes to an Eddie Izzard bit where he talks about he was sure as a kid that he was going to get get discovered by a big movie guy and say,
Yeah.
that kid, I want that kid, the creeping kid. I'll put him in my movie, the creeping kid. So it's not like you're creeping around Amazon star searching products to say, okay, you got the golden ticket, I pick you. It's a very,
Yeah.
very analytical, very tried, true, trusted process, and it's all about the numbers.
Yeah. And if you really think you have the magic and someone's willing to pay you for it, and they're not going to pay top dollar for it because it's not hasn't proven anything yet, and you really think it has magic, then you'd want to back end part of the juice, right? That's what I love about so many of our deals. Like you take like the Angry Orange or whatever, you know, that seller's super happy because he could only take it so far, and then we took it to this big heights, and he was still getting paid for it. That's a good outcome for everybody. So if you have something you think it has the magic, make sure that you get a piece of the upside if you're really sure of it.
So on the larger business side of things, Troy asks, your primary focus is Amazon, but how does a diversified channel business affect the multiple paid? For example, if Amazon is the largest account, but other international markets and direct sales to consumers account for almost as much or more, what does that do to the numbers?
It's it's a good question. Like there's a there's a correlation that's not always direct between the more complex your business is. If you're trying to sell to people who have a portfolio of businesses, right? The slightly less appealing it can become. I'll give an extreme example of like if you have uh, you sell 1,000 products and they're all made to order, and you have factories in 19 different countries making these individual products, and you're doing 100 million a year, but you're in 172 marketplaces. Like the amount of like whoa, right, that you would get from that from most people is rather high. That being said, it doesn't always hurt, particularly if you're in a new marketplace and you're showing steady growth, or you're in wholesale, but you're like the doors you're opening is like a steady rise. That will still add a significant value to it. But a lot of people in this M&A space, they're Amazon or ecom people, or they're Amazon marketplace people, and they're not experts in those other things. So some might look at that asset as being like, we can't do that right now. It's just too much stuff, too much newness, too much whatever. So, but I mean, I always like to give clear answers, but it really does depend. Sometimes we look at a business like that and we're like, we love it, like sign me up. And then sometimes we'll be like, there's just a lot going on here that's kind of making this thing messy.
What kind of impact is it an added strength if someone's got patents and trademarks and all that kind of stuff? We had William ask, we have patents and several trademarks, manufacture in the US and import from China. Is that an added strength to have or no?
Uh, yes, depending on the strength of the patent, right? That to me is like the strength of the IP is really meaningful. I'll give you, we had a product. This is actually I put the deal together year like right when we started out, and it's a really good business. We've done really well on it. But the manufacturers in China who own the IP, right? Their cousin started selling against us and attacking us, right? It was like one of those kind of wacky things, and like so we had to get around the IP so we could go produce it somewhere else, which we did, right? And it was a couple months of drawings and figuring out approvals and all this stuff, and then whoop. So the buyer is going to look at like, what does this IP actually mean? How strong is the patent? And that to me is, and if it is strong and there's an interest in the market, yes, your asset is significantly more valuable, for sure. If not, though, like you just have to know, you have to know what you have. We've seen a lot of patents where it's like, okay, well, this patent is actually just for a latch that's on the base of this thing, and if we make it a magnet, we get around the patent.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
It does. So you talked about um, one of your brands and how that seller was super excited because you made it something huge and they got to benefit after, which brings the question of what happens after
Sure.
Thrasio acquires a brand. We had somebody in particular ask if the brand is leveraging various vendors for accounting, advertising, etc. Do you leverage the same vendors or do you switch to your own? Like, what happens once they're a Thrasio brand?
Sure. I mean, we try to be in some ways relatively custom in the sense that we want sellers to feel very comfortable selling their businesses to us. And sometimes that means participating a lot less, and sometimes it means participating more. Generally now it's participating less. When you sell a brand to us, we put each brand through a 500-point conveyor belt system where over a period of like, let's say 3 to 6 months, we optimize the PPC using our systems. We redo the branding. We check the supply chain to make sure it's long-term viability. We see if a contract manufacturer can take it over to reduce COGS. We check the packaging. We do all like every little point thing to try to optimize this brand for the future. We look at product launches to see if there's any adjacencies that could be done. And that's how we reliably deliver steady results. And that's why often people are excited to sell to us, even after talking to other people, because they believe that their assets will be in good hands with us. And it's not always perfect and smooth, whatever, and things take more time than you think they take, but that's what we do. And we want people like to be excited about Thrasio and to be excited to be part of the journey if possible. We don't have to. We buy brands that have straight up multiples, and that's fine too. But there's something that like the people who will go along with the earnouts generally know they've built a good thing that could be better. The people who demand exact upfront cash, not always, are people who've maybe done some stuff and they want to make sure they get paid. It's not 100% reliable, but it's something akin to that. And we want the people to be along for the ride with us so we can share in the growth and the excitement of sort of like being in business together when possible. It's just it's great. It's great to pay out earnouts. It's awesome, right? So again, we don't always have to do that. It's not the end of the world for us. We kind of like to, in some ways, customize deals the best we can, so the seller gets kind of what they want.
That makes sense. I love this question, and I think we're going to end on it because it's so good. So obviously, you don't have to give like the name or anything, but you'll ask, can you give an example of a company that you saw that wowed you as an Amazon acquirer? So I think we'll want like specific details, but obviously identifying details
Sure.
redacted.
Sure. No, I don't like. I've had a few. They seem to have a strong correlation between uh, me hiring them after they sold to us. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you run across people who are just sometimes so sharp. I love meeting people who are smarter than me and it's like better at stuff. It's great. Like not very hard in a lot of things for me to do that too. But like, um, I had one business that was like, it was one dude and he had everything buttoned up. He was great at PPC. He was great at branding. He was great at his flat files. He was great at like his keywording thing, Google optimization. He did it all himself. And I was like, whoa, there's nothing. This was in the early days and I was still like analyzing deals. And I was like, there's nothing about this brand that could really be optimized. He's done it all. And that's super rare, right? I also had some that we purchased, and I'll give it. This guy works for us now. He's a Shark Tank winner. His name's David Toledo. He runs my product launch team for me now. Super crazy, brilliant guy. And they just ran out of cash for their business to keep on growing it. So they sold to us, and he's built a 70-person team for me now. And he just would have things where he'd be like, oh, well, you know, we weren't really getting the data we needed with our software stuff. So I just built this Power BI tool myself over the weekend. And oh yeah, I know packet trade. I know how to do all that stuff. Oh yeah, I used to be an engineer, and yeah, I know how to like make the products. Oh yeah, I like knew exactly how to psychologically position a customer to actually make them convert, and it's all in the same brain type thing. You know what I mean? It's a super rare thing to have that cross section of skills. We all have like real blind spots, and he and that team just didn't. And that to me was like so exciting. It's like, all right, well, we're gonna build something together. Then I can't wait to get started. And both of them, by the way, I like to consider myself a good salesman. It took me like 3 months to convince them to come and party with us, but I'm really glad we did.
I got another really good one, and we have just enough time for it. But you've basically been presented with a word problem. So are you ready for it?
Okay. Oh yeah, I hated taking logic in college. It's my least
You
favorite
have
course, but let's go for it.
You have an established product that is a disruptive technology that solves a widespread problem. You've built a brand, have utility patents, and established sales of 5 million. You've done your research and determined that 50 million is doable in 3 to 5 years. Does Thrasio overpay now to lock down the opportunity, or do they wait until the growth happens but risk losing the opportunity to another aggregator?
Gotcha. I we would consider overpaying now for the right circumstance. Again, we have to see it too. We have to see the roadmap. We have to see how it is and believe in it. If we believe in it, then those are generally, I don't get called into many M&A calls anymore, but those would be ones where that sort of thing would be like, yeah. And I'd have David Toledo look at it myself, and I'd be like, we see this thing and we see what's happening. And sometimes you do see that future, right? And if you see the future, then that, and by the way, like not everyone will see the future in the same way. I might look at, or someone on the team might look at it like, dude, this is some of that, we'll call it angry orange magic, right? Or we had other ones that were just like, wow, this thing's going to double as soon as we get our hands on it. And those are great. Those are great when those come across the desk, and we'll reach out and pay for it now. I'd also say, like, if you really think that that is the case, then dude, you want like a long ass earnout, right? You want to piece that action for a while, and you want to give it to a team like ours that has 1,000 people who can go and do stuff for you. Like that, to me, that becomes the exciting formula.
So I'm excited for that particular attendee to get in touch with your team.
Sure.
And then I think that as the host of this webinar, that somebody should tell me what this product is, because I'm dying to know. Um, well, John, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was very informative, and I think that we had people that were raising their hands and asking questions. And if people want to get in touch with your team, they can just go to the website and
Yep.
find contact information there, right?
Totally. Yeah. You can do that. And again, you can find me on LinkedIn or whatever. And Amazon community still uses Facebook. I don't use it much for just Amazon stuff, but whatever. You can find me, and I'll point you in the right direction always.
And if you need anything from me, I'm ldowning@takeametrics.com. Don't email info to get to me, just email me directly, ldowning@takeametrics.com. It seems like every webinar, somebody emails the info line, and that's not me. I mean, I have info, but I'm Liz.
Sure.
So John, thank you so much. We will definitely send anybody who had a follow-up question. If you want me to get your question to John and his team, just email me directly. But I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.